Thanks, colleagues. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the session this morning. It's great to have you here, and it's great for everybody to join us. Colleagues, you'll know that the DCDT throughout the years published several policy directions, and as an industry association, it's really important for us to help you and help the sector to understand these policy directions, its intentions. And sometimes when you read stuff without context, then you don't always understand it. And it's always phenomenal for us to be able to invite the DCDT to join us at these sessions, to talk us through the policy direction, the intention, etc. So you'll know that that the data and cloud policy has been published some time ago already, and subsequently the implementation plan has been presented. And it's really, really important for us in all sectors that we provide feedback to the DCDT on these policies that they implement, even for the DCDT. And I think Alfred will repeat what we're saying, what I'm saying this morning is, they can only take their lead from private sector. So they have to get feedback from us. So, when they ask for feedback in the form of documentation that we publish or that we send out, I really want to encourage you as a company to sit down, complete the feedback and give it back to them. That's also their gauge in terms of what works, what doesn't work, what needs to potentially change in the future. So welcome, good morning, colleagues, and welcome to the session. It's a great pleasure. I just want to welcome everybody from the DCDT and from the regulator that is on this call, all our members that have joined this call, and even non-members. You're all very, very welcome this morning. And a special thank you to Mr. Alfred Motu that is here and that is giving up some of his very valuable time. Everybody will know that it is that it's been SONA. So we've all been in Cape Town, and we're all trying to be back and backwards and forwards. But welcome everybody. And welcome, Mr. Motu, and thank you very much for your time this morning and your willingness to share some of this information with us. I see we are already 70 people on the call, so great thank you and great welcome to all of you. Thanks, everyone, and welcome. Mr. Motu, I'm handing over to you.
Thank you, Anita, and thank you very much for always coming up for us. The Digital Council has been a very supportive structure for the department in many respects, to be honest. But most importantly for us is the fact that you have always been willing to galvanize your industry colleagues to be able to engage with us. And you would agree with me that even the development and finalization of this policy was largely based on our ability to engage industry, to get feedback from them, to get input from them. So we're talking about a policy that we can today say we are co-owning, and that is a very important step in the development of policy, especially in our sector, because there are many complexities that we need to be aware of, that we need to take into consideration, and that we need to have an understanding around. And we know that the policy development and implementation environment has become a little more complex over the last 5 years, because COVID happened and it left scars that might take some time to heal. At the same time, we have had load shedding. That also had a significant impact on the industry. On top of that, we have to deal with infrastructure vandalization, which has also become a very big issue. So when we talk about implementation, it is important that you also be aware that we have an understanding of these challenges. We have an understanding that these challenges will also have resulted in the increase in the input costs for industry, and we need to find a way that we can say, in spite of these challenges, what are the things that we can be able to do, and then start collaborating around those two to be able to at least achieve the most impactful outcomes. So I thought it is important to give that context, talking about the policy implementation. But as I start putting the presentation on the screen, I want you to also not be surprised when you see a lot of activities led by government or government agencies. This is just an acknowledgement of our responsibility that we need to be the ones who are coordinating, who are facilitating, who are leading, and making sure that we monitor that things happen. But most importantly, as you notice from the post, is that we also realize that there need to be, you don't just say people can do this and that. You need to also focus on what are the critical enablers, because then it needs to be clear that each of the parties that are party to the implementation needs to discharge their obligations and responsibilities to make sure that things happen. So as we say to industry, we need these things to be implemented. We also need to be able to acknowledge our role in supporting the industry, whether we create an enabling and policy and regulatory environment, or creating a situation where it is secure and safe to conduct business. So these realities we need to confront if we are able to also make sure that policy implementation takes place. You know, in South Africa, there's a constant saying that we make beautiful policies, but when it comes to implementation, it's a challenge. So we need to start in our policy development approaches, start looking at these dependencies and say, how do we then move forward, making sure that we deal with them in advance rather than start trying to look at them when you start implementing. And indeed, you'll learn in the few months that the department is starting to initiate processes that attempt to bring industry on board at the level of policy initiation, so that we are already agreeing on the principles, we are already agreeing what are the specific things that we are trying to address, what are the problems we are trying to address, and are we addressing them appropriately? Do we need your policy or legislation, or do we need some level of cooperation or collaboration in terms of maybe memoranda of understanding to address certain challenges we have? So those kinds of things are things to look at. Without going for a long time, I know we are limited in terms of time. Maybe I should just get started. As we remember, one of the core focus areas for the policy is infrastructure, digital infrastructure. So the important part, especially on the side of government, was to ensure that we have an integrated storage and computing infrastructure, providing a single view of government, supporting data sharing and system interoperability. Obviously, we are aware when we talk about data being crucial for evidence-based policy making, it means amongst all government departments, there must be that sharing regime, that interoperable enablement for government departments to be able to respond to the actual needs of citizens based on direct evidence derived from data. You can imagine what we can achieve if you have data from Home Affairs, Education, Department of Social Development integrated. You can address a lot of things in a very easy way, because you are able to plan in advance. If you have the health department having that data available, the Department of Education already knows how many children they are planning for in a certain year to start school. Then you have to make sure that we put adequate infrastructure. That's just one of the examples we need to make. But we also realize that obviously people who look at SETA and say, hey, is that possible? But we also realize our responsibility, especially because SETA is one of our SOCs. We also recognize our responsibility to make sure that SETA is properly positioned to be able to discharge this responsibility. That's why under critical enablers, you see we are talking about ensuring that SETA is rationalized, repurposed, and capacitated to make sure that it discharges its responsibility. Then we go and talk about the digitization of paper-based government documents. As you be aware, I think most of you, when you visit most of the government departments, especially in terms of health, home affairs, and others, what you see is large volumes of documentation where people still need to fill papers, you still need to fill forms and so forth, saying we need to make sure that all these documents are digitized so that they can be easily accessible, they can be easily retrievable. But obviously, most important, if you are talking about data sharing, you need to take even those old documents and make sure that they can be easily shared, because they still have an impact in how we do things. So it's saying that is one of the projects that need to be prioritized. Obviously, there has been initiatives within government of where you have, for instance, home affairs. That's where the baseline is, where they have been doing that. But looking at the experience, you would also see that if you allow each department to do it, they might take up to 5 or even 10 years just to complete that process, because even the process at Home Affairs must have started maybe 4 or 5 years ago. That itself tells you that you need that integrated approach that says we can, whether you appoint a service provider to specifically focus on that. So that is what we are looking for. Again, because of SETA's mandate, they will be responsible for coordinating that. The third one relates to the development of a compliance regime for data infrastructure. Obviously, the procurement of data storage and cloud services will be done through SETA. So we vest in them the responsibility to be able to develop a clear compliance regime, so that if we say that we want to encourage significant investment in data centers in South Africa, we want to be leading in terms of data centers for the rest of the continent, we need to be able to have a clear compliance regime that anyone who wants to invest can look at it and say, oh, this is a feasible environment for us to invest, especially because most you find that government will be the biggest customer. So notwithstanding industry customers, most of them it will be important for them to say what is it that government looks for, because government would have the largest quantities of data. So we're saying SETA needs to be able to develop that. So we already put in a predictable environment for those who are interested in investing in South Africa to say, okay, this is the environment that is favorable for us. Again, we do understand that there's an issue of having to capacitate SETA again to do that. We cannot really overemphasize that. But we'd also remember in the policy, we're talking about the Data Advisory Council. That's where, because then you'll be able to get the expertise you require to be able to guide in terms of what are the standards that you need to put in place. The third one talks about, obviously, the capacitation of SETA. I think I have already talked about that a lot, but it is also an actionable issue on its own, because it requires different levels of processes, including review in legislation, including development of business cases. So we're saying we need to be able to prioritize it, because it is critical to digital government. You can't talk about digital government or e-government if you're having SETA that is struggling. And I think the fact that we are hosting the G20 this year will be an acid test for SETA to determine its capability. But we believe that it will also be a learning for them to say what are the capabilities that they really need to have to make sure that they compete with counterparts across the world. The next one relates to the acceleration of the implementation of broadband connectivity initiatives. As you are aware, the department is busy implementing SA Connect, and if we obviously critical to ensuring a digitally transformed society and a society an inclusive digital economy, you have to look at ensuring that not only are citizens connected, but they are also having access to equipment and other mechanisms that would ensure that connectivity, but also having affordable quality connectivity. So that there has been now, especially at G20 level, where they started talking about issues of meaningful connectivity, because they acknowledge that connectivity on its own is not enough. You need to have meaningful connectivity. That is connectivity that is fast, connectivity that is secure, that is affordable, and that is available whenever it is needed. That's how they refer to meaningful connectivity. So we need to direct this connectivity to ensure that it also responds to this. So you don't go around saying you have connected people only to find that they only have access to 3G. Yes, 3G is still important in other areas, in other sectors, but for somebody to participate in the digital economy, it is not adequate. You need to look further than that. So we also looking at, because it also talks about speed and other related factors. As you would remember, it's been about maybe more than 6 years since the implementation started. So there is value in considering its review. Obviously, we also need to ensure that the issues of spectrum are properly addressed. The issue of implementing agencies being capacitated. We need to look at issues of infrastructure security. You'll see that it becomes more elevated as we go down. Then the issue of skills. Obviously, you can't overemphasize the importance of skills, especially because right now, there's continuous talk that the ICT sector has got a shortage of skills. And this has been a conversation for several years now. There's even talk about engaging Home Affairs to create a regulatory or legislative dispensation that allows us to source skills from outside the country. So, it becomes a bit of an irony in a country where you have high levels of unemployment and talking about sourcing skills from outside. So we're saying we now need to take more than just a limp-wristed or reactionary approach to digital skills development. That's why you need to normalize them across the learning ecosystem. So already digitally related courses and skills need to be part of the school syllabus. The Department of Education needs to start looking at that. And out of our engagements with them, they have indicated that they are already looking at that. Obviously, the challenges in our schooling systems in terms of allocation of resources and issues of connectivity become the most important critical enablers in this area. So because you find there is that discrepancy between your rural schools, your urban schools, and then your suburban schools, where the capacity is totally different. I mean, I attended a school where we were theorizing about science. We were doing physical science, but we were theorizing because we didn't have a completely and adequately capacitated laboratories. So we need to obviously, we will also need to, besides the syllabus, also need to address other enablers in the schooling system to make sure. But most importantly, obviously, you need to start with the syllabus so that digital skills get normalized in our schooling system. The next one relates to, again, skills development, skills interventions in government. So if you're saying you're trying to drive digital skills in South Africa, it wouldn't help if you have public servants who are content to run with notebooks and making people fill forms and so forth. I mean, you go to the traffic to go and renew your license disc, you still have to fill forms. They already have your details on the systems, but they'll make you fill a long form rather than just take the particulars of your car and retrieve your information information on the. So the issue of digital literacy among public servants, it becomes also a very critical enabler for digital transformation, a data-driven economy. The next one is access to quality and reliable government data. You'll be aware from education, from health, from home affairs. Across the system, you have monumental amounts of data that are dealt with on a regular basis, that if made available in processed form to different stakeholders, be it industry, be it SMMEs and startups, that's where you can encourage innovation that is required for citizens to not only solve your day-to-day problems, but also be able to start innovating in terms of digitally tradable goods and services. That's where you start talking about the inclusive digital economy. So the issue of availing data availing government data to different stakeholders in our economic ecosystem is very crucial. We can't be talking about the value of data without making it available, and making it available obviously means making sure that it is of the right quality and it adheres to the existing policies and legislation. That's why we're making sure that the quality, non-sensitive data open by default and available to all citizens. That's how you start trying to develop a data-driven economy, a digitally transformed society also driven by data availability. So we believe the issue of access to quality and reliable data is very crucial in this instance. Access to affordable smart devices. In addition to this, obviously, it's not so much part of a data and cloud policy intervention. But again, when you say you're talking about a data-driven economy, data-driven society, digital transformation, it means people should have access to devices. But luckily, most of you will be aware, because I'm quite sure that most of you have also been participating in the digital economy process. You'd also have already spotted certain duplications with the digital economy master plan. So just to alert you that we are also aware of that, and we are working towards ensuring that there is integration, because if from our side, we're also talking about skills, we are also talking about connectivity, you're also talking about devices, it means you have to report to each of us, which wouldn't make sense because we are one department. So we are beginning to, as you know, there is also an area in the department that runs on digital skills as part of the implementation of our digital skills strategy. So the digital economy master plan deals with some of these areas. So when we go to finalization, obviously we will be rationalizing all these interventions to make sure that certain interventions are only reported in one particular area, skills are reported in one particular area, and then when we talk about the implementation of the data and cloud policy, then we are clearly refined in terms of what are the things. So these are mentioned so much more in terms of saying, if you want to ensure participation in a data-driven economy, this is some of the things that you have to look at. So access to affordable smart devices, don't be surprised if you see it here. It will ultimately find its place in the digital economy master plan. Access to free data for indigent citizens. This has been a very heated subject, but I believe, I'm hoping I'm not delusional, but I believe that we have begun to find each other, in the sense that we need to understand your complete value chain in terms of how this is supposed to happen, so that we also able to attribute responsibility in different areas. So it's not about going to industry and saying you need to make sure that free data is available. It's about what is it that government also needs to do to enable such an environment, and what are the things that industry have started doing that they can actually be able to leverage on. You don't expect an overnight thing, something like this to happen overnight. As you would remember, when I started from the beginning, I tried to articulate the environment in which we function, where I talk about COVID having happened, where I talk about load shedding, infrastructure vandalization. So you can't look at this without also considering these challenges to say, if industry is continuing to have these increased input costs, what are the things that we need to do to assist them? If you are talking about indigent citizens, do we have a standardized indigent citizen list so that the industry can then be able to go back and say, having this level of challenge, what are the things that we can do, and do them incrementally? Like I say, I don't expect a revolutionary change overnight, because everything is cost driven. Everything has to be based on sustainability, so that you don't jump to do something and along the way you start struggling. Now, you know, when people are used to a certain privilege, to start withdrawing it, you are creating challenges all over the place. I don't even want to talk about the 350 that people are getting. People are saying this is small, but try to withdraw it. That's when you realize how important it was. So we're saying we also need to acknowledge our responsibilities as government in terms of what are the things that we need to do to assist industry to be able to do that. So we're talking about the single standardized indigent list for South Africa. We're talking about enabling public Wi-Fi zero rating of identified, and that is very important. When you talk about zero rating, we know it happened under COVID, and there were certain specific conditions and obligations that that government did. That's why I always talk about having to have obligations across the board, not one giving, one receiving, but what are the obligations of all the stakeholders in the value chain. Therefore, you need to be able to identify and agree on essential websites that can be made accessible to a certain group of citizens, because they also need to be a provision for them to register, to demonstrate that they are the needy types, not just everyone trying to then jump on the bandwagon, receive free access to these services when they can actually afford them. Acceleration of SA Connect is one of those. Like I said, spectrum allocation mentioned, public-private partnerships, that collaborative relationships that we need to look at to make sure that these things happen. A great list of government essential services and educational webs. So you also need to agree what is essential for an ordinary citizen to have access to. Therefore, you can be able to identify the list of. When you say essential, we're talking from an educational perspective, but also from a government service delivery perspective. So when you identify those websites, you need to take into consideration these specific requirements. These are not the only requirements. Those can be defined as we work together. But we're saying when we talk about access to free data, we need to take into consideration all these critical enablers, not just to say there will be free data without, unqualified, because what you don't want is for policy directions to come through and say, industry, you must implement this. So we just wanted to make sure that we allay the concerns of industry to say this is not an arbitrary expectation, this is not an arbitrary expected action, but an action that requires collaboration and seeing each other's side of the story in terms of what are the feasible modes that we can adopt for implementation. I thought I needed to spend a little more time on this because it has been one of the issues that have been raised, and we took into consideration the concerns that industry has got all these challenges that we need to mention, challenges relating to increased infrastructure development, maintenance, and security input costs like electricity supply, challenges, infrastructure vandalism, and other policy and legislative challenges. So we're saying we acknowledge our responsibility as government to say, if we want these things to happen, we also need to play our part in this regard. The last one, is it the last one? No, this is not the last one, but it is another crucial one, the consistent citizen awareness campaign on data privacy and data security protections that are available for recourse and available mechanisms for recourse regarding this. This is just saying that we do have POPIA, we do have Cyber Crimes Act, Cyber Security Policy Framework, but how many people, how many ordinary citizens know about this? The abuse online in many respects. If you go on Twitter, the level of abuse of celebrities, sometimes even ordinary people, you got your pictures posted there, compromising pictures posted there for without your authorization. These are creating footprints that can digital footprints that can make your life difficult, whether it is career-wise or other aspects. There are legal recourses to this, but most citizens are not aware of that. So we need to begin to look at how we can support, because I know most of our regulators in South Africa will tell you that resource-wise, they are seriously challenged. So we need to start looking at how regulators across the board, not just in our sectors, across the board. The information regulator has done significant work on the POPIA, but how many people know about it? How many people, besides knowing about it, how many people know that they can actually use it to defend their rights? How many people can understand that you know your permissions, what you allow about your data, what you can't allow about your data? How many people know about these things? So you need a campaign. I've always quoted the NAB and the NAB campaign that you have here on the radio and TV on a regular basis. Maybe from this side also, where feasible, and I have to emphasize that where feasible, industry maybe can also look at assisting our regulators to launch that campaign, just to create awareness. Because when you start talking about data-driven economy, data-driven society, data becomes then the central enabler for most of the things that we'll be doing in future. So wouldn't there be opportunity for industry, maybe where it's, like I say, where feasible, to start saying, how can we support regulators as a corporate, as part of corporate responsibility? How can we support regulators to start this campaign of awareness among citizens in terms of their rights in respect of their data? What is it that they need to know when they share their data? Because nowadays you go to many places, they ask for your ID, they ask for your home address, they ask for all information about you in situations where they can only be asking about just one information. Why should you provide your ID, your home address, your salary number, your workplace, all these kinds of things? Citizens should be able to ask the right questions when such information is asked, because after that, you don't know what is going to be done with such information. Do those companies asking for your information also make a commitment to say that your information won't be shared with anyone? Don't want to be providing information. Tomorrow you're having 50 calls about some companies offering all kinds of things that you don't need. So you need to create that citizen awareness that says you don't only have data protection laws, but you also know how to use those laws to protect yourselves. We're saying this is very crucial. That balance between making data accessible, giving your data, because providing permission. You can't just say a citizen has got the right to provide permission and withdraw permission in respect of their own data, but we don't know, they are not aware what are the legally enabling mechanisms for them to do so. So that awareness campaign becomes very important to empower citizens in terms of their data, but to also be able to provide their data willingly and understanding the consequences. But there should also be provisions for at some point. That could be part of the evolution of our digital society. But I believe that there should be, at some point, be a provision that says you should also have the right to say, I withdraw my data. It cannot just be something that happens indefinitely. At some point, you might want to safeguard your peace. You might want to safeguard your family and say, I think I don't want this type of data that belongs to me to be out there accessible to everyone. Well, the issue of the establishment of the Data Advisory Committee, I have mentioned it, is one of the part that is in the policy. Obviously, we acknowledge that as government, we don't have the knowledge, all the knowledge to drive a data-driven economy, a data-driven society. We acknowledge that there is extensive expertise out there. And the fact that we are able to develop this policy in collaboration with industry gives credence to that. Say, yes, and that is the knowledge and expertise we need to leverage on, so that what we come up with as part of creating a data-driven society is informed by everyone. And most importantly, obviously, it is implementable. When you form a policy or everything or an implementation plan, it should have all of society or all those who be critical in the implementation, so that they are able to guide you. What are the things that you need to look at? What are the checks and balances that you need to make sure that it happens? So the composition of this Data Advisory Council was based on that. So you draw on the experience and expertise of academics, of sector experts, of experienced officials who can be able to guide, to say, okay, if you need to make sure that this is successful, these are the things that you can do, and these are the things that you need to start with. So that is the reason why we are trying to establish that. We also acknowledge that there are also initiatives to establish a policy advisory council. We're also looking at whether there could be some kind of integration, so that we don't find ourselves running parallel processes within the same department, because that will also be not only embarrassing but also very ironical. So we will also examine that and see whether we can create some integration, so that in the Policy Advisory Council, maybe there could be a team that focuses on issues of data. So these are the things we are looking at, which means I'm indirectly indicating that there are also intention to establish a Policy Advisory Council. But that, as you would be aware, would be based on engagement with industry players again, to say we're looking at all the industry experts that we believe. It won't be everyone, because usually when you form such structures, there's always, why didn't you include that one? Why did you include that one? The fact is that those that we include will still have to be expected to engage the rest of industry before we can come up, because policy does not only cover experts, but it also refers to the industry as a whole. So whoever is there, you don't have to worry about why so and so is not there, but more of saying, can these people, do they have that credence? Do they have that respect in the industry to be able to coordinate everyone to be able to participate in this process of policy making in our sector? So that is the rationale behind the establishment of such enablement of data sharing exchanges between government and government. And stakeholders. That's where they talk about G2G, G2C, C2C. We need that regime that enables sharing of data and interoperable systems. At international levels, they are already talking about interoperable systems. I always get scared, say, with us, where there's still limited understanding of rights in terms of privacy, data privacy, security, and protection. And now we're talking about interoperable systems. But we acknowledge that in some instances, you might to enable whether it is continental or global collaboration on certain interventions that are critical for citizens across the globe. You might want to create those interoperable enablement for interoperable systems to facilitate those interventions, to ensure that they reach the right people at the right time. But in these instances, we are talking about locally, obviously gradually it might become, we would reach out to other countries. But you say in this instance, you need to, because there is now talk about what they call data for development. Now, data for development directly speaks to that, to say government should be able to access data from industry if it is deemed necessary to address certain interventions, especially because industry has got all kinds of data. You just look at a tracking company, how much of my data it has, where I go, when I go there, what time I go there, things like that. They can be able to track traffic patterns and be able to determine, do we need additional roads, do we need additional traffic lights, and so forth and so. That information is available for, I'm just giving a simple and practical example, but if you try to universalize it, see that there's a lot of information that industry can share with government. It's a lot of information that government can share with industry to also be able to, because in some instances, there is a broadly used infrastructure that has been put by industry. I know in my area, there's a road that has been built by industry players. So such interventions, you need to have data available to do that, because the building of that road would have been based on the understanding, establishment, and research that we need a road to pass this way, because the traffic buildup is creating problems in many respects, whether impact on the economy, impact on air pollution, and so forth. So that aspects of data exchanges, interoperable system, we believe it is very important to arrive at a point where we can be able to say, then we need and we're saying critical enablers for that is where we start developing a data for development. There'll be a determination whether it will be a strategy, framework, or policy, but obviously you need something that everyone accepts, and implementation can easily be facilitated across different stakeholder bases. So the issue of data for development is something that we also look forward to making sure that it is prioritized. I think I have come to the end of the presentation. Apologies for going a lot into detail, but sometimes it is important to create that understanding. Obviously, from our side, it was to say, look at this policy, and especially based on some of the explanations I have given, to say, are there areas for our industry stakeholders to also suggest? I mean, yesterday I was meeting with the e-commerce stakeholders. They were saying because e-commerce includes a lot of transacting online, and there has been a lot of fraud that is happening that has created distrust in terms of procuring things online. They are starting to take initiatives to make sure that at least you can restore the trust of the citizen, to say, if you see this, you must know that it is secure. You know that even when you procure things online, you get all kinds of correspondence that says your product is ready, come and collect, but provide this information. So they also said they want to embark on this initiative to make sure that there is something that gives assurance to the consumer that this is a legitimate transaction. Their information will be protected, so that, because what you are looking for, obviously, if you say inclusive digital economy, is where any ordinary person, any gogo sitting somewhere knowing can be able to do grocery shopping, they should have confidence to go online and order stuff from OK or Pick n Pay or any retailer. They should be able to have the confidence to do that. Right now, you still have many citizens who say, oh, if I go online, there's a danger that my money can disappear. So you want to create that confidence across the board. Thank you very much for listening and your patience.
Let me turn my sound on. Thank you, Alfred. I really, really appreciate the time. I'm just going to go to the Q&A. So if there's anybody that's got a question or you need some clarity, you can either post it in the chat or in the Q&A. I think just as Risha mentioned, the recording will be available and we will distribute this presentation. I think this is a public domain presentation. We can distribute this to you as well. And then just to go to the questions from Neo, I just want to make sure I'm at the top. Colleagues, if there's anybody that wants to chat, you can just raise your hand and then you can handle your own questions and comments. But Neo said that a lot of what you have mentioned to be part of the Cloud Advisory Board are not on the ground, seeing the scenarios happening as consultants are. It's quite a long. Neo, I see you've got quite a few points that you wanted to raise. I don't know if you feel like jumping in. There we go. I don't know if you need to be unmuted or if you can just chat. Is it possible to unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you.
There we go.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm coming from the perspective of I'm a young person working in the cloud space, and I think when I ask these questions, it's merely from a point of view of a consultant, so people who are on the ground. So I think this, from the presentation that's been here, this was kind of a general presentation, but I think mine a bit more focused in terms of the questions. So I think my first questions was, which organization departments within the workplace are you targeting with this? Is it HR? Is it operations? Is it just technology? Is it in? So that's just what I'm trying to just get with the presentation.
Anita, is it possible maybe to unbundle that question for me? I didn't get clearly what is it that she's trying to say. I don't know if you understood it.
Yeah, Neo, do you want to?
Yeah. So I understand what's been presented to us, right? So is this, maybe let me ask, is it from a general perspective, or is it focused on a particular department? So a department, maybe I'll make an example, like the HR department. You know, we need data in the HR department to drive the onboarding process or recruitment process in the operations department. Will this data then affect how facilities are maintained? So that's kind of where the question is coming from. So it's very niche.
Okay, no, it's understandable. I wouldn't say unfortunately, but the policy looks at a higher level than that. You know, there are certain things, if you enable, then you don't have to worry about when you take it down to the level, whether it's HR or finance, because you would have automatically enabled that. That's why we talk about data access, data sharing, data security, data privacy. Once you address those, then when you go to a lower level, it's more about how the organization itself then positions itself to leverage from the policy enablers in terms of the things that it can possibly do. So when you talk about a certain specific organization, whether it's government or even a private sector organization, in terms of government, when you say open data, from a government perspective, then you can start looking at what data should be made available. That's why we got a data classification framework that says this is sensitive data, that is not sensitive data. And even that becomes an evolutionary process. But we're not talking at that what I would call maybe rudimentary would not be the appropriate way. But we are not talking about that level. We're talking about high level enablers that would make everything else at that level you are referring to much more possible. Okay. I don't know if yeah.
Yes, no, that answers my question. I think, and my next question was, what are the training and change management processes that are being put in place in order to achieve this implementation plan?
the training, as you would have seen, there is a significant emphasis on skills. The reason why we say government to drive digital transformation in society also need to make sure that public servants are digitally capacitated to also be able to help that. It will be pointless to be equipped with all digital skills and innovation capabilities, and then you go to a government department, they give you a long form. So we're saying it should be across, create an enabling climate where when you want to go and apply for a license, all they need to say is give us your ID number or your car VIN number, and then you can just produce an ID to certify that this is you. So that digital skills and capacity development becomes very crucial, because once people know what to do with their cell phone besides taking selfies, then they become more empowered and can be able to not only use online services, but they can also be innovative in terms of what are the things that they can do with their phones, like I said, besides your ordinary day-to-day things. But there are also issues of content development. People should be able to know when somebody says I'm a content developer, it sounds like a complex thing, but an ordinary person should, even if they can't do it, they should know what it takes to do that. That to me is the change management that you need, where you normalize doing many digital things. It becomes part of your daily life.
Okay.
So it's not an intervention that comes from outside there. It's more of creating that enabling environment for everyone to do these things.
Okay. One last one. Sorry, Juanita and Alfred. I just want to say this, and I wrote it in the chat. Because a lot of those, just from the last thing that you said, a lot of those that you've mentioned to be part of this cloud advisory board are not on the ground seeing the scenarios that are happening as that we see as consultants. Perhaps the youth, myself included, should be considered in this. We see these issues and we try to speak to them and resolve them. An industry player reports on what we tell them. They don't know okay about whether the office space has cups or has laying cables to assist us. So yeah, basically that's that, because they are more, how can I say it, concerned with the bottom line and not what it takes for us to get there. So when you're considering this cloud advisory board, just a point, include the youth in that, especially people who've been on the ground and are the ones that are interacting with the normal citizens or the people who will be using these systems and being the ones that are providing the services to the citizens. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Neil. Yes, I can tell you the department has got different sections to reach out to stakeholders. Even the Digital Council itself, a lot of the times, most of the sessions they organize, they don't only reach to industry players. Juanita can support that. They also reach out to youth organizations, SMMEs, all that. A lot of the times you are not going to reach everyone 100%, but with the evolution of these processes, I believe that you can ultimately reach everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mutlu. I see there's a couple of questions in the chat, but I just want to go to people that have got their hands up. Chris, if you want to go next, thank you.
Yes, thanks very much. I wanted to ask, many of us share the vision, if not all, of making sure every South African has affordable access to broadband, and we realize it's absolutely essential for the society going forward. And you're talking about indigent households getting free access. I mean, if you look at the stats, and I'm sure you're aware of it, we're all aware of the challenge. Half of South African households, according to Stats SA, are on some sort of a social welfare grant. And I think the poverty figures are slightly higher, around 55%. So you're basically talking about half, if not more, households not being able to afford, even the basics for living. So I was just wondering what type of criteria you had in mind for the free data per day, and how it would relate to the sort of reality. Not a trick question. I'm sort of more trying to, as to get our heads around the extent of the issue. Thank you.
Chris, you're talking about free data per day. There's no specific mention of that. From our perspective, I think I continuously talk about the evolution of these things. The reason why I talk about evolution is that you start from somewhere. You don't want to achieve everything overnight, because if you try to do that, you might not be able to sustain. You will not be able to sustain it. So you don't become over ambitious. You look for those who can be able to, and gradually, if you look at our industrialization, especially when you go to, I don't want to talk much about the DEM and start to pull, steal the thunder from my colleagues in the DEM. We not only look at everyone acquiring a smartphone, a new smartphone. There are also processes of refurbishment of smartphones and so forth and so forth. So we're saying there must be a baseline. It must be where you can start. You don't begin to say, okay, because indigent also goes across different levels. Somebody once said South Africans, when it comes to cell phones, South African acquisition of cell phones is more advanced than most countries, which means somehow South Africans try by all means to be able to have cell phones. Those are maybe things that can be researched further. I don't know how it happens, but what I'm saying is that we're not looking for a revolutionary approach that makes sure that everyone has a cell phone, everyone has this. Obviously, there are those evolution, everyone has got their evolution of needs. You reach a point where then you can expand your needs based on your means. So it's not something that we want to do overnight, but we definitely not talking about free data for every day for citizens, because it is something that we need to engage with industry. That's why I was saying we are not prescribing as such. We're saying these are the things that government needs to do to make sure that certain things happen. So as we engage with industry, they'll say, this is what we are able to do, but we need to make sure that we want to be satisfied that government addresses these specific issues. That's why I was talking about issues like infrastructure, issues like load shedding, and many other underlying issues. So we need to make sure that, so each side has to make sure that there are enabling conditions to be able to do certain things. So this is the kind of thinking we are adopting in the system, not sitting on one side saying to the other side, you must do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's not the approach we'll be adopting.
Thanks, Thabo. Thabo, you've got your hand up. Just unmute yourself.
Good morning, everybody. Am I audible now? Can you hear me? All right. Look, I think my piece is that this document, as I look at it, as you skimmed through it, makes sense to me. I think by and large, everybody's on the same page in terms of this macro cloud and just a digital economy. But I think we are stuck in a very theoretical place, just South Africa as a whole. And I think just as a government, as custodians of this plan, there's a big understanding of what you want to do, but I don't think there's enough strategic implementation, nuanced plan and partners of how you're going to get onto the ground and start implementing these things. And I like that you said that there's no silver bullet that's going to happen overnight. These are incremental sort of things that have to build. And my thinking is that, the plan in itself is broad because I think it's inclusive of broadband and connectivity. It's inclusive of, even elements like when you build smart cities, I think it's a grandiose, lofty vision, but we don't quite understand what it means in terms of making sure you've got enough applications that consumers or citizens can consume government facilities and services through online applications, also private entities through retail, and connect those things in terms of devices that are connected through the internet and collect data and provide data-driven sort of services based on that ecosystem. But my point is that I think what you need to do now, and as SETA, and I'm talking particularly what SETA needs to do, is that I think it also creates a bottleneck as this singular monolithic entity that is the strategic implementation of this national plan. And you can do that, but I think they need to be much more proactive of creating open application and a two-way stream of active applications of people who have suggestions of what can be done where in small pockets. And I think some of the work needs to hugely be done in metropolitan and municipality spaces, where those municipalities needs to be assisted through private and public partnership that will fund certain applications and services to digitize systems for the municipality and how they relate to consumers. Just as customer service, how people are paying, how people are accessing the different city-owned entities from housing, social development, waste, all those things. There's a whole lot of work that needs to be done to digitize it, including policing. And there's a whole lot of youth who are unemployed. And I'm talking about skills that can be used for data capturing, skills that can be used for customer relationship management. And it's not being done because I think it's stuck at a macro level, at SETA level, where you have to oversee things that are supposed a priority to the state, like SARS or whoever the important clients are at that level, right? So my point is that, can you open a desk or can you facilitate a division within SETA, perhaps, that becomes the primary contact point for any entity that wants to engage with the government to facilitate a two-way stream of what are the active practical solutions that can be done that include inclusive integration of youth, right, in those models and interventions, and also co-solutionary. I mean, you have so much expertise that it's lost through the private sector. I'm talking about people who worked in private sector for 10, 20 years and are driving their own SMEs, but they find it hard to actually find meaningful work within the government space, and you're losing a lot of talent there because you're just not accessible to them. You know what I mean? So what kind of desk can you create that makes it a two-way conversation and not just a once-off sort of talk shop on that day, but an ongoing sort of channel? I hope that makes sense.
You made a lot of sense.
Thank you, Thabo. I don't know, Alfred, if you want to respond.
Yeah, I think it's useful to respond after they raise this issue so that some of the issues don't get lost. Because he was talking a lot about SETA, and I think I also tried as much as possible to labor on the capacitation, the rationalization of SETA, because there is, I remember I even mentioned the G20 to say that is another determinant that will push SETA to be able to understand the level of capacitation it needs. But I'm saying that there is this issue. You need to, we use the term rationalize, I think tries to talk to many things I can't mention here. But that's why we emphasize the issue of rationalizing SETA to ensure that it is fit for purpose in terms of the things that you are mentioning. But I also need to highlight something, that because sometimes we look at things as somebody out there needs to do them. Here, that's why we talk about data access. We talk about access to different, your data, mobile data or data that you use on your phone. The reason we talk about those different access areas, those access to infrastructure connectivity, is to create an environment where there is equal opportunity for everyone to innovate, to be able. When I interact with our Chinese counterparts, sometimes they show you a phone that has got many applications that enable you to access government services. So we want to say, we want to create an environment where the youth who can innovate can be able to submit to SETA proposals in terms of applications that can be used to ensure access to government services. And that's how you then bring them into the whole economic fold. That's why we are talking about digital skills. That is intended to create a holistic capacity building environment that enable everyone, because once you leave those layers, then you might find that you're focusing on a small group of people who are already capacitated to do this. So you entrench that situation where the market is still dominated by certain specific people who are the only one who are benefiting from the digital economy. Whereas if you create all these enablers that you might be referring to as lofty ideals, they are actually not lofty ideals. They are saying these are the things that you need to look at first. You need to look at access to data. You need to look at connectivity. You need to look at access to devices. And therefore, everyone, and that access to skills, then that's where you position everyone to have a choice to say, I need to actively participate in the digital economy. And therefore, if I can be able to have access to all these things, then I have that equal chance to do that. But what you're raising cannot be overemphasized, where you create a situation where everyone, innovative youth, can be able to submit proposals in terms of applications. What I always raise, even in terms of skills development, I always raise concern about is that we need to, industry is involved in many skills development initiatives. So we need to start focusing on skills that respond to economic requirements. You can't be saying we are training at the same time we are complaining that we don't have skills to fill positions in the ICT sector. So these things need to be balanced. These skills need to be able to ensure employability in the sector, but they should also be able to encourage innovation so that you already have youth that can be able to develop applications. I mean, when you go to look at all the applications available, I'm always thinking, where is a South African application that I can use on a regular basis? Where is a South African application? Because all the applications we are using are foreign developed. Even from the department side, we are developing what we call a digitech platform that starts to look at such. These are some of the things that are going to come out as we progress with this. I can admit to the fact that maybe as government we are not communicating as effectively as we need to, because you got more digital innovation agency. How many young people know about this? How many young creative people know about this, where they can come up with their creation and get them tested and endorsed? So these are the things we need to look at as all of government. But the issue of creating a policy and regulatory enablement is the start. That's saying everybody must have at least an opportunity to be able to do these things. Thank you.
Arthur?
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. Thanks, Mr. Moto, for the presentation. I think the policy is very well. My name is Arthur Kekana from the Department of Water and Sanitation. I think there are a number of policy interventions in this policy where it seems to suggest that the driver would be SETA. But at the same time, I think you indicated that SETA seems to be undergoing some restructuring, if you like, or repurposing, whatever that is. But it suggests like SETA is currently work in progress, and no one probably can tell how long is that restructuring process going to take? And I therefore want to, present that if we begin to cite policy interventions with the possible implementers as may not be available or could not be available or could even delay, I therefore think that this could be a bit of a risky move to put CETA in the forefront, while we all know, what the CETA's challenges are. So my point is that I think maybe we need to look at another player or a group of players that can drive, obviously including CETA, and maybe one of the one I have in mind, and I'm not saying it's what should be, but it could be one of the possible options like the CSIR or something similar that needs to drive this initiative, obviously with the support of CETA. But putting CETA in the front while CETA is under construction, I think that's a bit of a risky move. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arthur. I know you're speaking as somebody who has also been at CETA and also been in the DCDT. I understand what you're saying. The reality is that CETA is a mandated organization by law. By law, it's a mandated organization. And you don't change that role through a policy. There are mechanisms that can adopt. One can also admit that maybe as government, because sometimes we also need to admit where maybe some wrongs might have happened, is that maybe we haven't intervened to the extent that we needed to position CETA as an organization that can do all the things we're talking about. But the emphasis being that it has that mandate, and to change the mandate, you have to review a lot of things, including legislation, to position them to do certain things. In terms of collaboration, yes, as we face the G20, chances are there will be those collaborative efforts. And I can tell you that there's still a lot of things. When you talk about intervention in terms of CETA, obviously you are looking at short-term, long-term, medium-term, and but that does not mean while you are doing that, CETA is doing nothing. No, that is not the case. There are certain things that they can do. Then you look at what they can do and say, how do we help them to do it better, to do more of it? What they're struggling at, how do you help them to remove those struggles? And a lot of times, it's just some of the things that would come out later as we engage to do this. So I don't want to use this to try to define the mandate of CETA. I'm just saying CETA is vested in legislation to do certain things, and then you cannot bring a policy that then comes and say, no, this is going to be done by somebody else. You better say, if CETA is supposed to do all these things, what are the interventions we need to put in place to ensure that it is able to do those things? Thank you.
Abdul?
Thank you.
Please keep it short, brief, so that we can get through the questions quickly in the next 15 minutes.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Alfred, for the presentation. Mine is a very brief question. Abdul from Infrastructure SA. It's got to do with SA Connect. We know the benefit of SA Connect. We know the impact and the outcome of it is quite critical for South Africa. I just wanted to understand a little bit on the benefit, on the impact of delivery and accelerated delivery on the SOEs. How are we creating quick wins so we can actually see the benefit quicker in terms of the process, because it does have a huge impact. So that's my question. Thank you, Anita.
Obviously, SA Connect is a separate process on its own. That's why I was saying there are these processes, and as much as we mention them here, they are being managed elsewhere. But the department is continuously looking at the capacity that exists and the extent to which they are able to implement SA Connect, and that would also, so there is a review process that is taking place to determine whether you can bring other sectors, because we have deadlines in terms of when we need every South African to be connected. So you look at that time frame we set for ourselves, we look at the capacity that exists, then we can start saying, okay, these are the interventions that we need to put in place. That might include bringing other stakeholders on board to be able to help accelerate implementation. That's why in this policy we talk about acceleration. We know that it is happening, but it needs acceleration. Thank you.
Issues that my name is Tsidiso Medupi from the Free State. One of the issues that relates to this particular strategy touches base on data purification, which also bring a subject of data champions. For example, the Department of Home Affairs ought to be a champion on identity of every user. In some database, I'm known as TD, in another is Tsidiso, in another is another name. And this particular element is quite key. And I still agree with Kekana on the issue of SETA, particularly given that you have not also reviewed your regulation that points your minister at DPSA while you are sitting elsewhere. So those particular technicalities does really bring a strain in the governance of this particular process. One of the other issues that we are sitting with is the matter of transversal matters, where you find that every province is having their own Smallanyana website to design and deal with certain information, whereas we could have a central repository and champions in different provinces to add content in that.
Juanita, sorry, Tsidiso, sorry to interrupt you. We need, especially for the sake of time, I wouldn't want this to be diverted to discussing the issues of SETA. There is I'm not running away from this, but I'm saying there is a separate process. We can engage outside this to create that understanding. And the things that colleagues are mentioned, these are the things that we are grappling with on a regular basis. And there has been an accelerated process to address the challenges that exist with it. So if I can just ask for that indulgence so that we don't end up discussing SETA here.
Sorry, colleagues, my connectivity is really, really bad. So I hope you can hear me. I'm not going to turn my camera on. I don't know, I don't know what's wrong with it. But yeah, I'm in the communications industry. I suppose we're bound to have communication problems. The last one, Thabo Moloko. I don't know if you've already had an opportunity to talk, but you are the last question which we can handle for today.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to monopolize, because I did have an opportunity, and I think Alfred did answer to the best of his ability, I suppose. But I want to ask my question more directly now, and hoping maybe I'll get an answer, because I'd like to walk away from this engagement with some sort of next step, or how we can engage going forward. I did hear that he says, I don't want to make this discussion about SETA, but I'm trying to drive the point that as you said, as a department or in SETA, you probably will be humble enough to know that you don't sit with all the answers, both from a strategic or technical perspective, right? So the question becomes, what is this office or stakeholder project liaison strategy or person that is available to start the communication flow between external parties who may well have the solution, including resource, right? As I said, through some public-private partnerships that can drive at least some movement, even at lower levels. Because, Alfred made mention of the G20. And for me, those kind of litmus tests are also a bit disingenuous, because you will drive all the resources to pass whatever metrics of success that you have at that level. But that's an event. And it doesn't really leave us with sustainable ongoing interventions and strategies and models that keep the wheels turning on an iterative process. And the only way you can do that is to have an office or a person that can then take care of the stakeholders and a collaborative sort of approach of planning who's doing what, where, how big or how small, and how can it integrate to other parties. So I want to know, is there such an office or an email or project management division, or you know what I mean, that can be reached at this point?
Thabo, I think I'm just gonna, Mr. Moto, if you allow me, I think one of the better ways to try and do this is to try and work behind industry associations. I think often it is a very big, overwhelming task for government to try and stay on top of every single person that needs to be consulted or wants to participate. So I think exactly like what this morning is that, I think often government participates with industry associations who then represents the sector. So just as your name came onto our database, and you managed to learn about this morning's event. Similarly, where there's opportunities for further participation or inclusion in some of the other things, you can hear from it via these platforms. There's newsletters available. There's general communications that we often just post out there to keep people abreast of what is happening. So I want to suggest that you make sure that we've got your contact details and the relevant people in your office. And then we will do our very best to ensure also that communication reach everybody where there's an opportunity for greater participation.
No, Bra Alfie, I just wanted to make sure that my point is not clouded by this SETA issue. I think I raised two issues relative to purification of data and champions in that particular area, particularly looking at issues of identity, where, for example, the Department of Home Affairs become a very key player with regard to that. So you don't have a multiple user duplicating, and you find this in the different other databases where it's double dipping because they do not necessarily have a single repository of an identity where we can rely in. Then all other databases will then immediately deal with reading from that particular source, and that leads to smart cut within the Home Affairs to deal with all this other information that relative to that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you beginning to talk to the details of things that need to be done, which is not what the policy is about. The policy is about creating an environment where the things that you're talking about become easy to do. That's why we talk about also gathering experts in the sector who can be able to say, for us to move towards a data-driven digital economy, digital transform society, which include industry and government. These are the specific things we need to do from an institutional perspective, from a legislative perspective, from a strategic perspective. These are the things that we need to do. I mean, as part of this process, we have engaged departments of Home Affairs. They also come, they raise issues of, some of them relate to what you're saying, Department of Social Development, Department of Health. A lot of them raise these issues. So they have been raised. And so I say, first, you need to look at that level where you can be able to enable certain things that can happen at the level of details. And that's where we are starting. And Juanita is right, that the reason why we engage these associations and government department is specifically for that. And I can tell you, we have had, even in the policy development phase, we have had robust discussions. Some of them were, I can't even begin to describe, but it was like a fight, but we ultimately managed to find each other. And even with government departments, it's the approach that we are pursuing. We have had to engage departments as clusters, but also individually to say, we know you are a critical implementer in this area. What are the things that you plan to do? the issue of SETA is something that is getting urgent attention, because we know it could also be an embarrassment for us in South Africa. So these things are not here, because we talk at a high level. It doesn't mean we are ignoring those particular aspects, but we say first we need to create that enabling environment for them to happen. Because if you jump down there and you have not addressed this policy and other issues, then you're going to be stuck somewhere. You're going to be stuck, because you have to refer to the policy and say, where is the policy that enables me to do that? That's the point I'm trying to make.
Great, thank you, Alfred, and thank you, colleagues, for joining. Lionel, please post your message in the chat. I'll make sure that it gets to Mr. Mothu, but we have to wrap up now. Thank you, all the people from the DCDT that joined us this morning. Colleagues, these conversations are really so important and critical. It needs to be robust. It needs to be a safe space where we can, debate and dialogue. Otherwise, there's no point in having these conversations. And it's been a very, very valuable morning. I think we've all taken and learned something, hopefully. And then all of those that have registered, we will share the recording link with you, as well as the as well as the slides. Mr. Mothu, thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate it's a really busy time within the DCDT. And colleagues, thank you for your support as well for the association, and we look forward to seeing you. Risha, I think the next one is the rapid deployment policy with Mr. Wiltz from the DCDT, and I think that's in a week or two's time, if you just want to post the date in the chat. But colleagues, you're all welcome to attend the next session as we go through this educational series. And the only thing that's left is to wish you a very happy Friday, and hope you have a fantastic weekend, a safe weekend ahead. 28th February, we'll see you then for the Rapid Deployment Policy webinar. Take care. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mr. Mothu.
Thank you, Anita. We are always ready to engage the sector as per request. Thank you very much. Everyone, enjoy the rest of the day and your weekend.